In recent years, China has arrived on the world stage as a world power, with extreme economic growth and gaining power and influence in ways that are much more different than Western nations such as the United States. In the West, we often accept and even praise private property as a natural way of life. However, in China has much more different attitudes and methods towards private property. So what is private property? Private property is the private ownership of land, production, and ideas to accumulate profit. This includes corporations such as Amazon or Walmart. This contrasts from public property, which is property owned and operated for public use. In the U.S., we have valued private property ever since this country was founded, and have many laws in our Constitution protecting and enforcing private property. The Fourth Amendment protects private property from unreasonable searches by the government. However, the definition of unreasonable has varied and changed over time. The Fifth Amendment keeps the government from being able to take private property without fair procedures, or due process. The Fifth Amendment also limits the use of eminent domain, or the conversion of private property to public property, such as if the government uses private property to build a public road. Such conversions require compensation at market value, and today, many are trying to further limit its use. As the Fourth and Fifth Amendments demonstrates, the U.S. greatly values private property and limits government intervention, even when needed. These protection measures are strong in the U.S. and have been so attached to our identity that we could hardly imagine a society that doesn't value private property the way we do. However, China has emerged with a rapid growing economy and growing military strength as a new competitor on the global stage with completely different attitudes towards private and public property. To understand Chinese property rights, we must first understand the Chinese Civil War, the Communist Party, and the economic reforms of the 1980s. Our story begins in 1912, when China declares itself to be a republic after the collapse of the Qing dynasty. The nationalist KMT, or Kuomintang, is formed under Chiang Kai-shek and reunifies the country in 1928 after a bloody warlord period. The Communist Party of China is formed under Mao Zedong in 1921 and controls the mountainous Yunnan region of China. These two parties, with their vastly different political ideologies, were natural competitors in China until the Japanese Empire invaded in 1941. This invasion forced both parties to work together, and during this time, the Japanese Empire would commit numerous atrocities and massacres against the Chinese citizens, with 15 million to up to 20 million estimated deaths. When World War II ended, the communists and nationalists were once again in conflict. However, the nationalists were exhausted, divided, and corrupt. The communists had also gained support after the numerous massacres committed by the Japanese Empire left many communities nowhere to turn. In 1949, the Civil War ended with the communist victory. After the wars, China was left in ruins, with most of the country still ruled and with little to no infrastructure. The communists began a series of land reforms, most notably the collectivization of all rural land. This means that land belongs to everyone and is mostly operated by either the state or cooperatives. To this day, all rural land is collectively owned. Keep this in mind for later. After the death of Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping became leader in 1978. He reformed the economy in a system known as socialism with Chinese characteristics, which encouraged foreign investment in a mixed market economy. These reforms caused rapid economic growth we see today, but also increased economic inequality, corruption, and restrictions on freedom that resulted in the Tiananmen protests. Modern-day China is in an unusual relationship with its property values. In 2003, a law was introduced in 2003, a law was introduced that aimed to improve property rights but fell short and wasn't enforced. A housing bubble, which has grown to be a huge market bubble which could have disastrous effects if popped. The housing bubble crisis really began with local governments. To make more revenue and continue the high amounts of economic growth, the local government buys unused rural land. Remember, rural land is collectively owned and cannot make much money. However, local governments can redefine rural collective land as urban, which can be sold to developers at extremely high prices. This is so effective that often cities make 40 to 50% of its revenue by selling land to developers. Construction also increases GDP, which feeds China's growing economy. However, so many of these construction projects are often built quickly with low-quality empty homes. So why are low-income people buying these expensive, low-quality homes that they won't even use? In China, Owning a home is considered a social necessity. So many people feel culturally pressured into buying a home, especially men who are seeking marriage. Many families save thousands of dollars so that their children can afford multiple homes. And now, real estate has accounted for about 70% of all household wealth. This is all how 90% of all homes are owned by the residents, and how 94% of all citizens who haven't bought plan on buying in the next 5 years. However, eventually the prices for these empty homes will reach unsustainable levels, so the central government of Beijing has several solutions to deflate the bubble, such as the introduction of a property tax and slowing down lending. This is how Shanghai went from empty to booming. So in conclusion, we in the West have many different laws and rules which have existed for so long and shaped our way of life that we can hardly imagine any other way to regulate property. The US has a lot of different laws to protect property rights, even if the government needs the property for certain reasons. Meanwhile, in China, property rights are often violated in order to succeed in GDP growth and to make room for certain infrastructure projects. Collective and state-owned property also dominates. Perhaps we in the West will learn these lessons from China, such as how to avoid the giant housing bubble, how to own our own property, how our own property laws could change, or how our property laws could impact economic growth. Regardless, it's important that we reach a conclusion that moves us forward.